We're gonna work hard today, but after the intro. Roll it. Hi everyone, welcome to Pal to Tech. Today we're covering lesson number 3 in my ongoing series of Capture One tutorials. I am picking up right where we left off at the end of lesson number 2. Therefore, if you have not seen my Capture One tutorials previously, please go watch them before continuing with this video. Now today things are going to be a little bit different. I have an actual RAW file for you to download, which is going to be the exact same photo that I'm using so that you can follow along exactly what I'm doing. This is the photo we are going to edit today. This was not shot in a studio. This is not a professional photo. This is not a professional model here. Rather, this is what you see when you walk around the hotel lobbies in downtown Atlanta, which is good because straight out of the camera, this RAW file needs a lot of work. These tutorials are not about, showing off and showing you amazing photos and having an appreciation for the art. No, taking RAW files from the camera and making them better. Learning, and learning. By the way, this is an awesome costume and it freaked me right out when I saw it. Interesting story about this photo. The person who's dressed up as Pennywise in the photo actually used to be a dentist and does cosplay in their spare time. Yes, this is what your dentist does when they're not in the office, ladies and gentlemen. Totally awesome. And I will have a link to their Instagram page down in the description below of this video if you'd like to follow them and tell them Pal to Tech says hi. I will also have additional photos that you are going to be working on and making those available as downloads in future lessons. But for now, for today, this is the photo we are going to be using. Now, if you choose to download this photo, you may download it as a link will be provided below. However, I do request that you please use this photo only for the purpose of this tutorial for you to practice on while you're learning Capture One. Let's begin. You had some homework to do during our last tutorial, and one of the primary assignments was to set up your tool tabs and tools to a workflow that made sense for you. Keep in mind, as I demonstrate the next few concepts in this video, my tool tabs and my layout is going to look different than yours. And there's no right or wrong way to do it, but we are now done talking about tool tabs and layout and what the user interface looks like and all that stuff. Let's start editing. So the first thing we're going to do is open Capture One and start a new session. I'm clicking on New Session. I'm going to call it Pennywise. And I'm just going to store this session straight up on my desktop. Using the blank template, again, these are the 4 folders that I discussed in previous videos, and I'm going to click OK. I now have a blank Capture One session open and just ready to bring some photos into it. I click on the Capture folder because that's where I want to import the photos into. I'm clicking on Import. I am going to set the source. I'm going to choose a folder. And it's on an external hard drive right here in a folder called Stills. There they are. I'm going to click open and there are my photos ready for import. I'm not going to apply any styles, any presets, or any adjustments. Styles and presets we will cover in a future video. We'll go into detail on the difference between the two of them. I'm clicking import all. All right, and you can see them right down at the bottom here. Okay, we are now starting from import. And when you bring a RAW file into Capture One, just like Lightroom, it doesn't look that great, right? I mean, that's why you're editing in an editing program. You want to make it better. There's a lot of problems with this photo, okay? Composition problems, the color balance is terrible. If you zoom in and look at it, it's not entirely sharp and in focus, okay? And it has this weird hand. I don't think that that hand belongs to Pennywise. I think that was somebody else in the shot. The first thing we're going to do in our workflow, once we've imported a photo into Capture One, is apply what's called base characteristics. As you can see right here, there is a base characteristics tab, and there are 3 choices to it. The ICC profile is picking up the fact that I took this photo with a Fujifilm X-T2, and it's automatically applied, so you don't need to do anything with that. You could, of course, select another camera and start playing around with all these different styles. We're not going to do that right now. Keep the one that it's set said it was. Fujifilm X-T2. The next one, curve, that's where the film simulation is applied. And as you can see, it not only has the film simulations for the Fujifilm X-T2 camera, but it also has a few curves set in here for Capture One, such as extra shadow or high contrast, etc. We're gonna stick with the Fujifilm film simulation. Now, auto is an interesting choice right here, and what auto means is that it has applied the film simulation you told the camera at the time you were shooting. So when I was standing in the hotel lobby shooting this photo, if memory serves, I believe I shot it in Pro Via. But if you look at the picture, have a look at this. Let me zoom in a little bit. All right, this thing just freaks me out. Okay, but if you have a look at this, okay, auto is this. Take a look at the, see how as I'm going through these, they change? If I go to Pro Via, it's the same as auto. But if you're worried about that, then just choose the film simulation that you want. It doesn't matter. Keep in mind, auto is the one that was assigned at the time you took the shot. I'm gonna choose Pro Via. And when we get to this where it says engine, Capture 120, that means the processing engine, something that you should know about raw processing. As the years go by, you know, as the world turns and the years go by, these programs get a lot smarter. And as they get a lot smarter, they're able to better process raw files. So that's why shooting in raw is so awesome. Right now, where the engine that basically reads the details of the raw file is set to Capture 120. All right, now we've applied the film simulation. We're now gonna make our first image edit. All right, this is the white balance tab, and it has some very common things that all of the tabs and tools have, all right? First off is a little question mark. It opens up a help document in your web browser. Next is a little wand. Do you see that? That means if you click on that, it's gonna automatically try and fix whatever this tool is. This happens to be white balance. So if I click on that little magic wand, it will automatically try and correct the white balance of the photo. Watch this. I'm gonna go ahead and click on it. Boom. Not very much. It didn't do a very good job. Pennywise doesn't look that much better, so to this tool. We're gonna do a much better job at fixing the white balance than Capture One can figure out. Just to recap these other two icons, this one right here resets the tool back to no adjustments at all. It resets it back to a clean slate, so to speak. And this one right here copies the adjustments to the adjustment clipboard, which you can then paste into other images that you have. Okay, so let's fix our white balance. Now, under mode, it is saying shot. In other words, whatever the camera caught at that time, whatever the camera was configured for white balance is what Capture One is applying here, whatever information is in the raw file. So what I do is I stay back with shot. This little dropper is our friend. Do you see that right there? That is the white balance picker. And there are two places that you can find this tool. One is right here in the white balance panel. The other is at the top of the screen right here. You see that? There, the little picker tool. The very top one is pick white balance. You can choose that and that does the same thing. You can also press the W key as a shortcut on your keyboard to get the white balance picker. When choosing white balance in Capture One, you want to select a neutral gray in the picture. It's not always easy to do. Well, first of all, it's very easy to do if you can get Pennywise to hold up one of these things, right? Excuse me, Pennywise. Yeah. Don't eat that child's hand or arm. Hold this thing up, please. And these color checkers are awesome. I will have a link to them down below, but you can't always be pulling these things out when you're in a hotel at Dragon Con with a bunch of Pennywise and crazy people around you. So I gotta use my eyes. I gotta use my brain. I gotta use them together and figure out, what's the neutral gray here? All right, so let's look at this picture. Let's zoom in a little bit here. All right, neutral gray. Well, I'm sure as heck, what happens if I click on the hair, you know? You see, you can really screw it up by not choosing a neutral gray. So let's undo that. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the undo, right, for white white balance. All right, now let's find a neutral gray. Sometimes there just isn't a neutral gray, and you're gonna have to maybe go with white if you can, or something along those lines. I'm gonna choose this wall in the background right here as a starting point. Okay, that's a lot better. Okay, so let me show you kind of a secret little function you can do. If you click on the name of the slider, just click and hold down on the name of the slider, it will switch to the before version. So I'm gonna click and hold down on Kelvin. Have a look at Pennywise. You see that? Clicking, holding down. That's before, after, before, after. By the way, if you've got another tool open, which I have the eyedropper, how do I move this around? You press, this is a great tip, you need to learn this. You press and hold down the space bar, press and hold down the space bar, and look at how it turns into a hand. Now I can move it up, and when I let go of the space bar, dink, it's back to the tool again. Learn that one, it's really handy. It looks like it's still a little bit too warm. So I'm going to cool it down a little bit more by simply dragging the Kelvin slider. And as you can see, there's values. You could type in the values right there. Remember, 6,500 Kelvin, right? That's daytime, that's sunshine, that's outside. But this photo wasn't taken outside, it was taken inside a crowded hotel, indoors. Let me fix this. I'm gonna grab another white point. Okay, let's fix this there. Once you get your color balance just about there, then you can decide, do I want to go cooler than I should? If it's Pennywise the clown, do you really want to have a nice warm feeling around it? No, you want to make it cold. You want to make it unsettling. So I'm going to make it a little bit colder than I would if it was of a picture of like a basket of puppy dogs and the flowers in springtime, right? I want this to be cold. I want this to be disturbing. And I am going to move the Kelvin slider down just a little bit more. So right now, I have the photo exactly where I like it with white balance. So what I want you to do right now, we're gonna stop the video. I want you to import the raw file that you have available for download, or you can use one of yours. Once you've imported it, I want you to then apply the base characteristics like I showed you how to do, and I want you to fix the white balance by selecting a neutral gray in the photo. And while you're at it, select a few other things to see what that does to the white balance, okay? Now that we have fixed the white balance, before we get too much further into this, we probably should rotate the image a little bit and crop. Capture One does have rotation and flip tools, keystone, crop, and that sort of thing. I actually don't want to crop this photo much because I don't want to crop the red balloon out. If I made it a perfect square, right? If I go crop here, you see I'm moving up here, click, square. If I do that and I go to crop it, but I don't think it's gonna look as good. So I don't wanna do that. However, what I do wanna do is rotate the image a little bit. Look at the eyes of Pennywise. You see that? They're kind of like this. They're not exactly straight across. And for some reason that bothers me. Just to show you how to do it, what I do is I go up to this little rotator right here, or I could do it from the rotation and flip tool here. Remember, multiple places to do the same thing. And by the way, if you wanna change these tools or modify them, you can right-click, customize toolbar, and then go to town. You can customize this thing however you want to. All right, so I'm gonna click on rotate, and I'm just gonna do rotate freehand. You see that? Or I could have just pressed R. Then I take my mouse, I hover over on a corner of the picture until it turns into a little rotating thing, and I'm just gonna rotate. See, look at Pennywise's eyes. You see that? There we go. You would think, because it's like Lightroom, that you would just press return and it would take. Doesn't work like Lightroom. To finalize your crop or your rotation, and this tripped me up the first time I used Capture One, what you have to do is you have to select another tool. I'll just click on the little icon right here, the select icon, boom, there, it just did it. I'm all done with the rotator. Let's get back to editing. Before you start your exposure adjustments, you want to be sure that you have your histogram viewable at all times while you're working on exposure. I already showed you how to pin tools at the top of this area right here, so go ahead and pin your histogram to the top so that you can be watching it while you're making your exposure adjustments. If you don't know how to do this, watch my Capture One lesson number 2 video, which goes into how to do that. So the exposure tab is just like the other tabs. It has the same tools across the top. A little help one. If you click on the question mark, you get the browser opening up to a help page. You have an auto adjust, you have a copy, and you have a reset. If I go ahead and I click on the auto adjust, Capture One is going to apply whatever exposure it thinks that the photo needs. Let's try that now. I'm clicking on it. Okay, there we go. Capture One just applied that. Do you see how Pennywise got a little bit brighter? If I click and hold down on the word exposure, I can look at a before, after, before, after. So this is what Capture One thinks Pennywise is as properly exposed. It's a good starting point. Where you have exposure, this numbered area, this is the number of stops that you can increase or decrease the exposure. It matches camera stops. So you can turn it all the way up to 4 stops of overexposure, all the way down to -4 stops. So that's what those numbers mean, right? I'll go back and do the automatic one. There it is. So again, Capture One thinks this photo should have a 0.64 increase stoppage of exposure. We're not going to get into those a whole lot. Contrast, obviously, as you turn that up, gives you more contrast, but these are not the tools I think you should ultimately be spending your time using. You should be using the Curves tab, which we will go over in a future video. In the meantime, just know that you can sort of overall adjust the contrast, overall adjust the brightness with these sliders right here, okay? Now we get into dynamic range, and this matches what Lightroom has with highlights, shadows, blacks, and whites. Now, before we start adjusting those, it's very helpful to turn on your exposure warning tool, which you can do by clicking on the exposure warning icon right here. You should always have that available right here. You click on it just like that. Oh, and look at that. So we have some problems right here, okay? What about the dark areas of the image? Did I blow any of the dark areas out? What you need to do in Capture One is you need to turn on the dark highlight warning as well. And the way you do that is you go up to Capture One, Preferences, Exposure, and you see where it says Enable Shadow Warning? Tick that box. And of course, you can adjust the threshold of the tool through the preferences of exposure, which you get into from Capture One Preferences. If, for whatever reason, let's say I decide to turn down my exposure, I should start to see some blue. See that right there? That blue warning? That means it's totally black. There's no color information. Too bad, so sad, nothing you can do about it there. Okay, something you really need to know with regard to the exposure warning tool, and that is this tool will basically be reading your image based on whatever color profile you have it set to. And when I say color profile set to, I mean your output color profile. If you go to View and then choose Proof Profile, have a look at this. Selected Recipe, or you could choose RGB Output. Now, I can't get into color profiles in this tutorial, but just know that sRGB has a much limited threshold of colors than Adobe RGB, right? So if this thing is thinking that you're going to export it as a JPEG in sRGB, then it's going to kick up more exposure warnings than it would if you had it set to Adobe RGB. For more information about color profiles, you're going to probably want to Google that, or let me know in the comments below and I'll do a full-blown video on what the hell the difference is between Adobe RGB and sRGB. And if that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you right now, don't worry about it. Just go with what the exposure warning is telling you, because I'm getting a little picky with how you can fine-tune this. But it's awesome that Capture One does allow this level of granularity in the tools. Check these 4 numbers out. You see how when I move my mouse around, those numbers change. You've got the red, green, and blue channels. You see that? Look at that. As I'm moving the mouse around here, they're changing, and they're pretty high. Once they get to 255, that means I've blown it out. There's no image data at all. It's pure white. Look at this little doohickey right here. That's a technical name for, you know, a little thing in a picture. I don't know, a doohickey. This little white thing right here, this background, it's probably a background light of the hotel. But have a look at this. When I hover my mouse over it, look at that. The values go just about almost completely blown out. And if you look, the blue channel and the green channel, gone. There's only some image data, little little bit of it in the red channel. So this one's pretty much a goner. But what you can do to fix this is you can move down the highlights. Have a look at this. See, I'm turning down the highlights. Look at this area of the picture. I turned it all the way down to -100. Now, if I hover the mouse over it, it's a little bit better, but I couldn't really recover a whole lot. Okay, you see that? If I move the highlight up to here, it's pretty much the same because it's already blown out. And if it's already blown out in your camera, there's really not much you can do about it. Okay, but down here though, it does get better. Watch what happens, right? This is how it was before. As I turn down highlight, look at that. You see that? You get better detail. You're turning down those highlights, those blown out areas, and you can definitely fix pictures that way. However, here's the problem though. Okay, have a look at Pennywise. Now, we want to emphasize the white and the brightness of this costume, obviously, and the face. You want to be able to see it. However, you don't want too many blown out highlights here. So when I turn down the highlights, here it is normal, okay? Look at how nice and vibrant that is, right? As I turn down the highlights, this looks great. This starts to look terrible. So what does one do? We're gonna get to that in just a minute. Hold that question, hold that thought. Next, shadows. You can turn up the shadows a little bit, the shadow areas, you see that? You can make your whites whiter, you see that? You can adjust the whites a little bit. You can mess around with the blacks, make the blacks blacker, the whites whiter, and these all work together. So when you adjust one, and then you adjust a second one, you may need to go back and adjust the first one. And while you're doing this, you wanna use your histogram. Watch the histogram even as, say, I'm adjusting exposure. Have a look at that. You see that? Look at what it does to the histogram. And you want to keep that histogram more or less kind of in the middle. I am going to now show you the single most important and most useful tool that there is in the entire program. And this is called the Layers tool. Those of you that have used Photoshop will know exactly what this is. However, those of you that are coming from Lightroom, you're about to get your minds blown. And after today's video, I doubt that you're going to be looking at Lightroom quite the same way again. This was your warning. Let's begin. There is a tool tab that appears in multiple toolbars called Layers. You see that right here? Layers. You're going to see it in many places. You'll see it maybe under the color one. It's also, I put it under exposure. You see it right there. And when you add a layer to one in one tool area, it will appear in all of them. It's basically duplicated across. So it's just for convenience and ease that you can see them right here, right? Under Layers, there it is. For those of you Photoshop users, just hold off a second. I've got to explain. Okay, when you're editing a photo, you're either making changes right on the photo itself, or in the case of Photoshop, you can have layers, different layers. So you can make some edits to a layer for, say, color, make some edits to a layer for, say, exposure, make some edits to a layer to remove, say, an ugly spot on the face or something like that, right? And those layers can be removed and added and moved around and all kinds of things. And within the layers themselves, you can mask out just a portion and have everything else ignored. So you can have a layer for making blue sky bluer, right? And it's non-destructive photo editing because you're not editing the photo, you're editing the layer. And when you see the photo, when you go to export it and hand it off to the client, it basically condenses everything together, one photo, and out it goes. So in your Layers tool, there are lots of ways to create a new layer. You can click right here, and there's 4 choices right here. You can also create a layer by clicking on one of these icons right here and just starting to draw on the picture. You see that? It created a layer. You can also create a layer up here by clicking on this, and you could say, you know, draw linear gradient mask, right? And as you start to draw it, it creates a layer. Lots of ways to create a layer. But what I tend to do And I would recommend, if you're starting out with Capture One, that you do this. Go to the layers area, because this panel right here has everything you need all in one place. Now, the first thing you need to know is that there is always a background layer. That's your photo, right? So you can continue to make edits to that background layer independent of these additional layers that you are adding. Now, in Capture One, you can have up to 16 different layers for your photo. Now, what you want to do is click and hold down on the plus. So click and hold down the mouse button as you click on that, and you'll see these 4 different types of layers appear. Most of the time, I would say you're going to want to choose New Filled Adjustment Layer right here. And what that does is it creates a new layer. And if you click on this little button right here, Mask Visibility, and say Always Display Mask, I'm just doing this for now. As you can see, this layer now is spread out over the entire image. So whatever you do to this layer right now, like if you crank up the exposure or you crank up the saturation, everything within that red area is going to be affected, the entire image. However, if you choose New Empty Adjustment Layer, now you click on the mask, nothing's there. It's like it's an empty layer. There is nothing there, and then you need to put something there. You might want to click on the Radial Gradient Mask, and then you can draw it, move it around, and now Pennywise, whatever adjustments you make to this layer, is only going to affect Pennywise's face in that red area. You see that? So what I tend to do, I almost never use New Empty Adjustment Layer. What I do is, if I'm going to do something to the entire image, let's say I'm just going to brighten the entire image and I want to make that a layer instead of, you know, working on the photo directly, I want to have it as a layer, then I'm going to do New Filled Adjustment Layer. And I think you should start with that most often. So let's now use layers to fix that exposure problem in the background without screwing up Pennywise's shirt, okay? To keep Pennywise's shirt nice and bright, but also have the background not blown out. Let's use layers for that. So just to make sure we're doing this exactly correctly, I'm gonna undo this high dynamic range. Remember, we turned down the highlights to fix this area right here? I'm gonna put this back to normal, or I'm gonna put all these back to normal. And in fact, for kicks and giggles, I'm gonna make exposure normal. I'm not gonna have any adjustments to this photo at all. So now I'm back to the state I was in when I corrected the white balance when we started this video. And instead, I'm gonna make these adjustments using layers. First thing I'm gonna do, layers, I'm gonna click on the little plus and choose a New Filled Adjustment Layer. Now, before we go 1 second further, make sure that you are always naming your layers. Trust me on this one. What you do, you just click on it and you can say, I'm gonna call this one exposure. All right, now you see it's all red. The whole thing is red. I don't want that, because the whole thing, I know, because this is a New Filled Adjustment Layer, I know that anything I do to this layer is gonna be the entire picture. So I don't need to see this red stuff. So what you can do is click on the mask, click and hold, is just only display mask when drawing. Now I'm just gonna turn up the exposure to there, a little bit more. All right, got that. But as I turn the exposure up, we're starting to blow our highlights. That's okay, we're gonna make another layer to fix that. Okay, so now let's fix this blown highlight problem right here. What I'm going to do is create a new layer. And this time, I'm gonna choose a New Empty Adjustment Layer because I'm only gonna have part of the layer adjusted, so to speak. So a New Empty Adjustment Layer, and I'm gonna call this one Fix Hotel Background. Okay, I mean, you can name it whatever you want. I'm just trying to keep it simple for you here. I'm gonna click on this little targeted adjustment brush, you see that? And it turns into a brush, you see that? Now you can adjust the size of these tools by the straight bracket keys on your keyboard. So you can make them smaller, or you can make them larger. Get into the habit of using it. They're great keyboard shortcuts for this. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the area, right, where I wanna make the adjustment. I'm just kind of rushing this here, maybe a little bit there. And I actually, when I'm not drawing, I don't see what I just did. This is where you want to go over here, click and hold on to that, always display mask. Ah, there we go, much better. Okay, now I'm just gonna kind of do the same thing. I'm just sort of painting this area a little bit right here. Okay, trying to keep it simple. Now I'm gonna go ahead and turn off. By the way, it's a lot faster to just press M on your keyboard. So I'm just gonna hit M. See that? M turns it on, turns it off. So now that it's off, I'm going to turn down my highlights. and it's just affecting that area. It looks a little bit better. It didn't affect this. Now I could even, if I wanted to, create a new empty adjustment layer, call it Fix Pennywise's Shirt. And what I can do here is click on the linear gradient mask. You see that? Let me go up right there, like that. Have a look at this, okay? Now I'm gonna turn up exposure a little bit, and perhaps I'll bring up my shadows. Look at that. Have a look at that. Doesn't that look better? Now, if I did that to the entire photo, I would have totally blown these highlights out. So by using layers, I was able to selectively adjust areas of the photo. Now, the other advantage of using layers is that you can change the opacity of them and the intensity of them. Look at Pennywise's shirt. I can bring down the opacity. If I decide later it's a little too strong, I can bring it all the way down. And it's only affecting that layer of the photo. You can target all kinds of areas. You can make all your adjustments. And then if you decide, you know what, maybe I went a little overboard on that one, you can bring down the opacity instead of having to go into the mask and redraw it and readjust all the little sliders. You can bring it all the way up or all the way down based on how you think it looks. We are running out of time today on this layers tool, and there is still a lot more to cover in the next video. However, I want to show you something so cool to leave you with, to you'll be like, whoa, because I want you excited to do this, right? So we're just gonna dip into the color adjustment. I want to show you something really cool. What does Pennywise love? Red balloons, right? Watch this. We're gonna click over here onto this color area, or wherever it is that you have your color editor. You see the color editor right here? Now look at the color editor. There's a little tool. You see this kind of direct color editor? I'm gonna click on the balloon. Watch this. Click on the balloon. And what it's done is it's selected that color that I've chosen. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click up here to these three little dots, create a masked layer from selection. Now to verify this, I can press M on my keyboard for mask. It selected all the stuff that it thought was red, that matched that color red, but really it got the red balloon. That was the big one. As you can see, it added a new adjustment layer automatically. I now have another layer. Remember to name it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just crank up the saturation. I could change the hue. I could totally change the color of the balloon. You see that it is not only affecting the balloon, but it's also affecting this area right here and this area right here, and even on the face. And I don't want that. I only want to change that balloon color. So we need to erase the other parts of the mask in this layer. Now I'm in my balloon layer, okay? And there is an eraser tool. You see that? So I'm gonna press M on my keyboard to see the mask. I want to see where the mask is. Yep, there it is right there. I am going to click on the eraser. Gonna make it a little bit larger. All right, look at that. See? Erasing. Definitely don't need it right there. There we go, get rid of that. So now I have a layer. If I turn it on or off, you see how the balloon gets brighter or not? I can also lower the opacity of the layer. You see that? So your homework for next time is to do the following. Number 1, import and white balance correct the Pennywise photo. Get it looking good. Number 2, fix the exposure with that photo in Capture One using both the auto adjust, which is what Capture One thinks it should be, but also your own eye using the exposure slider as well as the shadows and highlight sliders. Make sure they're all in the right place. Make sure you've got your histogram where it should be, right? Get that stuff squared away. Then I want you to add some adjustment layers, and I want you to make Pennywise's balloon a different color. Make it green. See if you can do that. Try that. If you can't, then at least try and fix some targeted areas of the photo, like make the shirt brighter, just that area of the photo, by using layers. And for your last bit of homework, I'd like you to take a deeper dive into layers by experimenting with some of the other options. Let me show you. For example, you have a healing tool and a clone tool that you can apply to a layer. So I want you to try healing blemishes or try cloning something in its own layer. And we'll get into more detail in the next video. Well, that's all for today. I think I've covered a lot. We still have a lot more to go. But I hope I got you excited about the layer tool and about the potential of what you can do with Capture One with your photos. It's a very serious program and you need to really carve out some time to learn it. So do the homework I gave you and we will reconnect again very soon with part 4 of this tutorial. In the meantime, if you found this video helpful, please be sure to give it the like and subscribe, and I will see you in another video again real soon. Take care.